Happy New Year, innovators! How has your 2022 start been? 새해 복 많이 받으세요. I hope you have a year full of good health, joy, success, and happiness. As we speak, today I'm saying greetings from South Korea. Yes, I took my first international flight since March 2020 to visit my family and relatives I haven't seen in 2 years. It's been amazing to see my loved ones again, as well as enjoy good food, though it took some time getting used to the time zone again. I share this because as I adjust back to the new culture and new norms back in Korea, I'm reminded of the importance of inclusion. Diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and belonging, often shortened as DEI, is something we're all hearing and learning more about, but still have a lot more to learn. This is why, when we covered Inclusion Dilemma in Season 1 in April last year, we reflected upon how, despite good intention, many leaders and organizations struggle to create inclusion. Creating a workplace for all is not an overnight journey, which is why the constant care and development is important. But so is our workflow. Yes, and how we work. Today, I want to dive deeper into that. Not just about how we create a workplace for all, but how we design a workplace for all, and what we create, how we serve, and what we do each day. Hi, I'm Monica Kang, founder and CEO of InnovatorsBox, and your host of this podcast, Dear Workplace. Welcome to Dear Workplace.
Because it's not just blind and deaf children. Some are dyslexic, some have learning disabilities, and this is a way to bring them children's picture books that they would never have otherwise.
How am I supposed to help him? He is not set up for success. This system is not made for him. And again, as I mentioned before, I couldn't articulate it that way. I just knew it was unfair. I was like, I have to do what I can to be a good influence to him. And that was actually what made me go into counseling because I said, at least I can help him cope.
Think with me for a minute. What are 1 or 2 items you use every day in your normal work routine? Great. For me, I'll choose my laptop and my cooking pot. Now, I want you to envision how you would use these objects if you were blind, deaf, or couldn't use your arm or leg. How would it feel to engage in that same activity you felt you could do with ease every day? Yes, my experience typing and working on my laptop and cooking with my pot will look very different. That touch screen that feels so cool for an abled person becomes an uncomfortable tool for blind as they can't see what buttons they are touching. I heard this is one of the reasons why tech products that were upgraded recently were not as helpful for all users, as it was only designed for abled people. Yes, what I'm describing here is the importance of designing for inclusion, known as inclusive design. Whether it's product development or workflow development, we're all designing and developing things for others. But when we don't design for inclusion, or from a diverse user perspective, we're explicitly creating tools that exclude diverse users. We speak about this more in our blog a few months ago, which I'll add in the show notes. Want another example? Another reason why entering space as a female astronaut was harder was because a lot of the training and even space outfits were geared towards one figure, a male. And since females and males have different body types, the space outfits were often too big for a female and uncomfortable to stay safe in space for a long period of time. It wasn't until a few years ago this issue was raised, where more astronauts and space outfits designers brought it up so that we have more outfits that are good fit for all genders and heights. So inclusive design comes from every angle, from the products we design to the experiences we create for others. When we think of diverse users in mind, we could create a powerful experience for all users. But where do we take it from here? Knowing why it's important and needed is one thing, Understanding how you design and support other innovators to design for inclusion is another. Where do you start? Margaret says start by looking at your own experience that opened your perspective.
I was working in the inner city in New York City. It really opened my eyes to the inequities in education, the access, just all the systemic issues that were going on. And from an early age, I was trying to make sense of what was going on. I actually didn't have the vocabulary to articulate it. So if you were to ask me at the time, my experiences, it would be very different from now. So now that I'm doing this work, I do a lot of DEIJ, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work. And now I have the vocabulary to explain what was going on. But that was really the impetus for me to stay in education. I became committed to fighting for justice and to make sure that systems work for everyone. And so when I was teaching, my philosophy in the classroom was making sure that every student could thrive just as they are in the classroom. And it was my role as an educator to make sure that that happened, whatever that meant.
Meet Margaret Park, an elementary school assistant principal committed to fostering inclusion and equity in education for all youth. Being also a person of color, Asian American, and female, she also realized how important it is to design for inclusion in leadership, which is why she became active in the education community as well to represent diversity. She is one of the founders of SEOUL, spelled SEOUL, of a leader and serve as the advisory council for the Association for International Educators and Leaders of Color. She is currently in Seoul, South Korea, where she most recently served as the elementary school assistant principal at the Seoul Foreign School. She is a Fulbright scholar and received an Education Master's and Certificate of Advanced Studies from Harvard Graduate School of Education. So yes, designing for inclusion in education is something she thought a lot about. And this was further cemented when she walked one of her students home after a musical show in New York City.
One student, I'll just name him Juan for now. Juan was one of my students. His experience mirrored a lot of my students, and it really changed how I viewed my teaching. And so basically, I took my students to Lion King on Broadway. I was very lucky to get tickets for them. And I wanted to show them musical theater, which I'm so passionate about. And it's a dream come true. That's another story. But I was able to take them to Lion King on Broadway. We had an amazing time. We came back and it was the evening because it was a field trip. And, the students had to get their parents to come pick them up. Juan was waiting. So, it was 8:00. Parents were supposed to come before 8. We're waiting. Then his mom never shows up. And so I'm walking with Juan down the street. I'm like, why don't you just show me where your apartment is? And so we took this walk and he was taking me down the streets and it was very eye-opening for me. I mean, there were drug dealers, there was violence. We were going down the path that he usually takes. And it was just things that, I hear about, I read about, I saw it a little bit, but to see it through his eyes, because I was following him, it just really hit me. And then he took me into his apartment up the steps and, there's mice. Then there was 4 bullet shot through the door, right? And so I just remember seeing that. And then, his mother opens the door. She's very disoriented. She quickly grabs him and slams the door in my face. And so, I'm walking back and I'm like, okay, I live just a few blocks down, but I'm in this privilege. I have a warm electricity. There's no mice in my stairwell. I don't see bullet shots. The neighborhoods are so different. And it just got me thinking he comes to school every day, right, to learn. He comes to school with an eager mind. He has such a great attitude, and this is his life. And this story, I'm just sharing one of the many, just because that moment, that walk there and back was pivotal to me. That's when I really started to realize the injustices that went on and the inequities. And it was so real to me. And, I love this student so much. And I just realized, how am I supposed to help him? He is not set up for success. This system is not made for him. And again, as I mentioned before, I couldn't articulate it that way. I just knew it was unfair. I was like, I have to do what I can to be a good influence to him. And that was actually what made me go into counseling, because I said, at least I can help him cope. I can help him make sense of this world. And so that was a huge moment in my life that to this day. I remember thank you for letting me share this because, I haven't shared it in a while, but I can vividly, it's like a movie in my mind. I can remember it. And it's really stuck with me, and it's helped me to have hope when I don't feel like I have much hope, because at the end of the day, like when I left New York City, I had a chat with him, and just the impact that I had in his life that he was able to share was so meaningful. And so for me, that's been really amazing in terms of why I'm in education, right? Why I do the things I do. And when things get hard, I think about him and why it's worth it. And so, that's a pivotal memory in my life.
Wow, pivotal indeed. Thank you, Margaret, for sharing this. And yes, your student one was lucky to have you and have someone who really thinks about it in that way. And thank you for raising one of the key aspects in how we can think about inclusion as a designer. Walk in their shoes. Margaret was able to recognize the depth of inequality and got more curious about how she could support it because she took that walk with her students and absorbed it with empathy and an open heart instead of just sympathizing. That attitude and framing are key. After all, sympathy and empathy are different. Sympathy involves understanding from your own perspective and involves a bit of judging. Empathy involves putting yourself in the other person's shoes to understand why they may have these particular feelings and needs. Empathy requires differing judgment and more courage and self-awareness. I love how Brené Brown, a researcher on empathy, into a delightful animation, as I know these two expressions could be interchangeable and feel similar. Check the link in the show notes if you haven't seen it. The empathetic journey of Margaret took into how she became a proactive designer for inclusion, reminded me of why Richard wanted to create his nonprofit as well.
I'm Richard Reiman, and I'm known as the Audiobook Wizard. I have created a lot of audiobooks, narrated hundreds of audiobooks, and have created a nonprofit to make children's illustrated books accessible.
Meet Richard Reiman, founder and CEO of Imagination Video Books, where he develops inclusive audiobooks. As he mentioned, he earned the nickname Storybook Wizard after narrating and producing hundreds of indie-published audiobooks. He received a gold medal, National Ben Franklin Independent Book Publisher Association Award winner for audiobook nonfiction, is an audiobook-approved audiobook producer, and a 5-time winner of the Evie Award for audiobook narration and production. And as he continued his passion for radio, audio, and storytelling, he realized how a lot of content was produced without inclusion in mind. Picture books for children were one visible place. He kept noticing a lack of accessibility.
Yes, Monica, as an audiobook narrator, I noticed there was a gap in the audiobook world, and that is children's illustrated books. Children's picture books don't make great audiobooks because you can't see the pictures. And I realized I was a ski guide for blind skiers, actually. So I had a lot of blind friends and friends who were visually impaired, had some sight. And I talked to them about, did you get a chance to experience illustrated picture books? And they said, not really. Didn't get into audiobooks until they were chapter books. And I said, well, if we combine audio description, which is happening and growing right now in the world of movies and TV shows and theater, audio description for the blind, with these illustrated books, we can create a new experience, which is we can bring children's picture books to audio and to video by adding description of the pictures.
Yes. You may have noticed most audiobooks are the narration of the text, but not the illustrations, which means if you can't see it, you won't be able to envision the full story of the pages are trying to describe. Richard, why is making picture books more accessible so important?
Well, it's an incredible development time for children. Ages 3 to 8 is actually where we're targeted. We want to bring stories to them, not just entertaining picture books, but stories about children with differences, stories about children who have overcome some challenge in their life. So the books we're after are relatable to these children at a time when, especially if you have a vision problem or a hearing issue, that you can experience these illustrated books in a way, and they're for sighted children too, and hearing children. But this gives them a way to experience and also learn at a time when educational development of children with challenges is critically important.
Indeed. Richard's work is helping children experience inclusion from an early age. Being able to access the wonderful imaginary lands is not just a nice to have, it's a must-have to let them know they are valued, appreciated, and heard. Not only that, but it also shares all children that they have the right to access creativity, imaginations, and more early on. Out of curiosity, I asked if Richard could share some sample audio so that we could see how it feels different to narrate the audiobooks with and without the descriptive narration that he is referring to. Thank you, Richard, for giving us permission to share this.
Here's an example of before. One page taken from If I Were Your Angel, narrated by Michelle Maras, as a simple read-along.
If I were your angel, I'd use my harp to strum you notes, both flat and sharp.
Now here's the after. We add audio description of the pictures for blind children, captions, and simultaneous American Sign Language interpretation for deaf children. The after is a different experience.
If I were your angel, I'd use my harp to strum you notes, both flat and sharp. Fill your ears with joy.
I added his website so that you could see more videos showcasing the American Sign Language interpretation, as well as a description audio included in every picture book they produced. It's a commitment. I asked Richard what he is excited and worried about as he continues to design more children's books with his team for inclusion.
We started creating videos at imaginationvideobooks.org of children's illustrated books. And as we went on with audio description, we are creating audiobook versions and also adding American Sign Language interpretation for deaf children. Because as I learned when we were doing this project, there are so few books helping very small children, ages 3 to 6, learn sign language. And this way we have the pictures and the captions and another person in the video interpreting in ASL American Sign Language. So we've added that experience too. We've done about 70 books so far for the Described and Captioned Media Program, dcmp.org. We have a channel there, as they call it, a video channel. They serve tens of thousands of blind children, deaf children, their families, and educators. And so this is the resource we use, dcmp.org, to reach all those children out there with different abilities. Because it's not just blind and deaf children. Some are dyslexic, some have learning disabilities. And this is a way to bring them children's picture books that they would never have otherwise.
And all of this started just last year. He founded his business in 2019, but really took off in 2021. Now, in 2022, he is growing partnerships with publishers to inform them to design audiobooks for inclusion early on, and not as an afterthought. Plus, the inclusion design is not just in the post-production, but in the actual design and development of the products. Richard has a diverse and talented team that happens to include people who are blind or are people with disabilities.
We also make it our mission to employ some of the people that have visual impairments. We have a dozen narrators who are visually challenged. A couple of our audio editors are totally blind, so they're helping create these products. And there's no reason why we can't expand picture books into the audiobook world.
Margaret is similar in that she is fighting and designing for inclusion, not just for her students, but also in her role as a leader in education, a field where she constantly finds herself being one of the few.
I do have to say, going back to the systems, I did start to realize that as a person of color, as a woman, there are certain opportunities that are not presented to me that are for folks in other groups. And so being in a minoritized group, I did realize early on, again, this is me talking with the vocabulary. I didn't have the vocabulary back then, but I was noticing like I'm working so hard. I have credentials, but I'm not getting to the same places as some of my colleagues are. And so I had to learn how to find folks who would help me. And so get those mentors and sponsors, like folks who would open up doors for me, but also folks who would actually show me the ropes. And so I've been really lucky where folks would actually help me out. Every setting, school, institution, professional setting, I've always had one or two people that I developed close relationships with that would help me on that road. And that's opened doors, and that's always helped my decision-making process.
Don't let being one of the few stop you. Use that as a fuel to be a designer for inclusion and builder for all. And a skill you'll need no matter what inclusion you are building is a skill we spoke about in our last episode, self-awareness. I asked Margaret how she honed her self-awareness skills to have such a strong, clear drive. Answer: it takes time, but it's so needed.
I love that question because I think it is so important for especially leaders to have this critical self-reflection piece. No, I did not grow up with that skill. It was not modeled for me. It was not taught to me. I was actually taught to just stay silent and not express my feelings. I shared this with my students a lot. When I was a counselor, I literally taught feelings, and they'd be like, Miss Park, why are you teaching us basic feelings? I'm like, because it's important to label your feelings and actually identify them. Because I never had that growing up, and it's so important. I think a few things. I have siblings who are incredible. They're intelligent. They read a lot. They engage a lot with people, and they've been my mirrors. Actually, having my brother and sister, they've actually been a huge part of me reflecting, because when I wasn't reflecting, they would just call me out. And so I would get really offended at first, but then I would always realize everything they said had truth to it, and I would actually become a better person. And so just having them in my lives, they kind of created space for me to critically reflect. And so that's definitely been a huge part in that. But also my counseling background has been huge, because in order for me to talk about feelings and help other people talk about feelings, then I have to do it myself. So I actually took courses. I did role playing. I read. I intentionally did exercises to myself. I even went into my own therapy to help me reflect on my own life. And so I thought all those things combined helped me to critically reflect.
Yes! Thank you, Margaret! It takes humility, courage, and a lot of practice to hone our self-awareness. But this helps us understand how much of what we do, design, and lead is coming from our lens of how we show up, which is one point of view and not all. To constantly design for inclusion, we have to be aware of our own views and accounts for all the other views and experiences. You may be surprised how even that simple meeting routine you have with your team will feel so different when we design for inclusion. So what are you waiting for? Jot down a few action items today and start designing for inclusion. Find from your experience where you see gaps and lead with empathy and an open heart to listen to how you design for inclusion. I can't wait to see what world we create because of the actions and intentions you take each time. Thank you, Margaret and Richard, for taking a moment to share your story and joining our show. Please take a moment to learn more about their work and support them in their journey for inclusion. I put their information in the show notes so that you could connect with them. Thank you all for joining us today at Dear Workplace as we reflect on designing for inclusion. Next week, I'm eager to dive into how we rethink our career journey. How do you create your own career path? And what can you do to create new jobs if you don't see opportunities for yourself? Curious to learn more? Join us next week at Dear Workplace. This is your host, Monica Kang, founder and CEO of InnovatorsBox. Have a wonderful New Year start, and I'll see you soon. Happy New Year.
Hello, I'm Sara Piedrahita, the virtual assistant at InnovatorsBox, and I hope you're enjoying Dear Workplace. Maybe you already noticed my accent. I'm Colombian and just graduated from advertising. I also learned English mostly by listening to music in this language, which is something I love. This show is brought together by our awesome team: Sam Lammert on audio engineering and editing, Kelly Gravo on marketing, Akriti Pandey on website, Monica Escobar on branding, Leah Oricini on social media graphics, me and Flor on project assistance, and Luke Helder on music. Of course, Dear Workplace is hosted and directed by Monica Kang, founder and CEO of InnovatorsBox. To continue the conversation of remaining the workplace, visit us at innovatorsbox.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share. We'd love to hear what you enjoy and what I can convince Monica to talk about in our next episodes. See you next week.
Hey, it's Monica Kang from InnovatorsBox. Thanks for watching this. I'm so glad you're here. I hope this inspired you to be creative, curious, and courageous. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to spread creativity for all. See you soon, and have a wonderful, magical day.